Good evening. My name is John Henry, and I'm an alcoholic. In this Code Blue Big Book Action and Study seminar, we're going to go through the first 164 pages of the Big Book, the recovery section, and we're going to do the work that the first 100 people who recovered said we have to do to overcome this hopeless condition of mind and body. I borrow heavily from the Golden Slippers, from Joe and Charlie, from Clancy, and from all of the giants who have gone before me. Now, I don't claim to be any big book guru or any kind of top 10 spiritualist. I'm just a simple drunk. I was almost dead from the disease. When I finally became willing to do the action in our book, I was able to recover and have a pretty good life. So I'm hoping that there's 2s and 3s and 4s of you listening to this together. You're going to need a big book. I like the large print big book, highlighter and pen. I'm going to try to get some of the paperwork that I've got online. And please bring your willingness. Please bring your willingness and your open mind. And as you're going to see, we open every session with the set-aside prayer so that we may be more open to receiving this information. Thanks for listening. Okay, so what we've done so far is the first session we looked a little bit at the history of the book, and then we dug into the doctor's opinion. The doctor's opinion told us what the problem is. For years we thought that we had weak willpower, that we had low moral character, that we were sinful people. We just couldn't pull ourselves together. Well, we discovered in the doctor's opinion that we have an obsession of the mind and an allergy of the body, right? The obsession of the mind from time to time overcomes all ideas to the contrary and tells us that it's okay to take a drink. And then once we take that drink, we've got the allergy of the body, which all of a sudden our body demands more and we can't control how much we take. So if we have to drink because of our mind and we can't drink because of our body, we're absolutely powerless over alcohol. And if your life isn't unmanageable now, I'll tell you, you keep going, it certainly is going to be. Most of us, by the time we get here, we're already in a world of hurt. Last week we did Bill's story, which was the classic example of somebody who has the problem, right? It showed the progression of Bill's disease. It showed what happened to him, how low he went, contemplating suicide, and then how he was able to effect a recovery from the disease. So today we're going to read There Is a Solution, and I mean I've had a lot of people say, John, there's as many solutions to get well as there are people in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I always say, well, the chapter heading is There Is a Solution. It doesn't say there are many solutions, right? So we've discovered this solution that has helped millions of alcoholics not only to recover from alcoholism, but also to learn how to have a pretty doggone good life, right? Because what's the use of doing all this if you can't have a life with some happiness, some serenity, some peace of mind, right? We also find that we do these things and we're going to want to go out and we're going to want to share it and we're going to want to help other people. So in this chapter, they're going to talk, Bill in the first 100, they're going to talk about the 2 powers, right, that we're going to use to overcome our disease. The first power is the power of the fellowship, right? That's the meetings, the coffee, the cookies, the going to Perkins, the sober softball, right? That's vitally important to support us, right? But they're going to warn us in this chapter that alone is not going to be enough. We're also going to need the power of the vital spiritual experience. And we're going to get that vital spiritual experience through the working of the steps. It's also called a spiritual experience, a spiritual awakening, a personality transformation. And if we can get both of these powers together, I don't care how low you have sunk, you will be able to effect a recovery. So let's go to page 17. So again, there's that first word, we. So let's circle that first word, we. Right? Circle that. And at the top of the page, let's write, this is not a me program, me in parentheses. Right? I mean, that's how I lived my life up until I worked these steps. So this is not a me program, and put that me in parentheses. Right? We of Alcoholics Anonymous know thousands of men and women who were once just as hopeless as Bill. Okay, highlight the next 4 words. Nearly all have recovered, right? Highlight that and underline recovered. There's that word again, right? I sometimes will not necessarily have arguments, but discussions, right? And it's always with the old timers. You know, they tell me you can't recover, and I said, guys, when I came into these rooms, I could not stop drinking. I was physically near death. I wanted to kill myself. I was addicted to drugs, alcohol, and I have absolutely recovered from that condition. Now, I'm not saying that I'm cured. There's a lot of things that I still have to do to stay recovered, but I absolutely have recovered from the condition I was when I came in here. They have solved the drink problem. Underline the word solved. Right? And you know, of course, they're talking about, next to nearly all have recovered, just write twofold disease. The twofold disease. And you guys know, you don't need to write it because you know it's the obsession of the mind and the allergy of the body. So it is, we've recovered from a twofold disease. And you know, funny enough, I discovered that there were many other things wrong with me besides just my not able to control alcohol. We are average Americans. All sections of this country and many of its occupations are represented, as well as many political, economic, social, and religious backgrounds. Underline the next sentence. We are people who normally would not mix. You know, what a prophetic statement. You know, the first 100, I don't know, maybe I think there was 97 men and 3 women, but they were all middle-aged white guys, right? You go around AA today and you are going to see all different kinds of races and religions and young and old. Very prophetic statement. But there exists among us a fellowship, a friendliness, and an understanding which is indescribably wonderful. Okay, highlight the next 4 lines. We are like the passengers of a great liner the moment after rescue from shipwreck, when camaraderie, joyousness, and democracy pervade the vessel from steerage to captain's table. Okay, so what Bill is talking about right here, he's describing the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous by using something he thinks we're going to already know about. In the first half of the 20th century, the great mode of transportation from continent to continent was the great ocean liner. Right? So if you're over in Ireland and you want to book passage to the U.S. and you don't have any money, you are going to book passage in what's called the steerage section. The steerage is in the bowels of the ship. It's at the very bottom. They crammed people into rooms, so it was dormitory-style living, maybe even hammocks. They had lousy food. They had really bad accommodations, almost no fresh air. Right? If you had a little bit more money, you could go up to 4th class. If you had more money yet, you go to 3rd class. If you have even more money, you go to 2nd class. In 2nd class, your family might even get their own cabin, right? But if you got a lot of money, you're going to go 1st class. The 1st class people had big staterooms. They had the finest food. They had all the fresh air they wanted. They had waiters waiting on them hand and foot. But that wasn't even the most elite place of the ship. If you had the right kind of money, the right kind of lineage, and the right kind of religion, you would be asked to dine at the captain's table. That's the most elite part of the ship. The best food, the best prestige, everything is there. And Bill is going to talk a little bit about the Titanic. Right? So if you get somebody from the steerage section and somebody from the captain's table, right, the ship just hit that iceberg, right? And they're both on the top of the ship and they're looking at each other. They got nothing in common. Right? You got the muckety-muck and you got the work guy with holes in his clothes. Nothing in common. But the minute they jump off that ship and their behinds hit that water, they've got everything in common. They're trying to save their lives, right? They're trying to save their lives. And these guys, you know, they're helping each other. They're hugging. They're trying to get on a ship. And all of a sudden, these guys get on a ship, right? And they are laughing. They're singing. They're patting each other on the back. And it's just the most wonderful thing in the world, because they were both dead men, and now all of a sudden their lives have been saved, right? But we're going to get a little warning here, because when these two guys get to shore, they look at each other and they see that they've got absolutely nothing in common. So when they get to shore, they say, "See you later," and they each go their separate ways and they never see each other again. But we here in Alcoholics Anonymous, right, we escape from disaster. Guess what? Alcohol is always waiting right outside the door for us, right? So you can write "recovery binds us together." Right? Because alcohol, if we go our own separate way, the alcohol is going to get us. Now, Bill's going to give us a warning here, right? Unlike the feelings of the ship's passengers, however, our joy in escape from disaster does not subside as we go our individual way. Okay, highlight the next 3 lines. The feeling of having shared in a common peril is one element in the powerful cement which binds us. Highlight that. But that in itself would never have held us together as we are now joined. So Bill is telling us that the fellowship, just being together in these rooms, is not enough. It's not enough. We're going to need more than that, right? The tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered, circle it, a common solution. Circle that. Okay? And then highlight the next line. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree. Okay? So next to that "we," maybe draw a little line and write "first 100." That's the first 100 people when it says "we." That's not Bill Wilson alone. That's the first 100 people. And the common solution, you can draw an arrow to the other side and you can write "working the steps." Working the steps. Right? And it's going to tell us a little bit later on that when we work these steps, we're going to get that vital spiritual experience that we need to overcome this disease. And upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. Circle that word "action." Right? We can't think our way out of this. We have to do the work, right? And let's highlight that last line as well. This is the great news that this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. Okay? So, it's not the news of the fellowship, right? A lot of people think it is. It's the news of the vital spiritual experience. And I got to tell you, man, I can, in the last 5.5 years that I've been in these rooms, I've seen a lot of people come and go. And I've seen people come into these rooms who have tried to stay sober from the fellowship alone. And I got to tell you, if you're a real alcoholic, your chances aren't very good. I came in and out of these rooms for 20 years. I did the research for you guys, trying to stay sober by the fellowship. It didn't matter on how many sober softball teams. It didn't matter how many meetings I went to. I did not do this work. I eventually went out and drank again. And that's what I see. I can't, the amount of people that I've seen that have come and disappeared is remarkable. And that's why, the one thing that I do whenever I speak at these meetings is I tell everybody that if you want to recover, that we're going to have to work these steps. Going to the meetings alone is not going to do it. An illness of this sort, and we have come to believe in an illness, involves those about us in a way no other human sickness can. If a person has cancer, all are sorry for him and no one is angry or hurt. But not so with the alcoholic illness. For with it there goes annihilation of all things worthwhile in life. It engulfs all whose lives touch the sufferers. Highlight to the end of the paragraph. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers, warped lives of blameless children, sad wives and parents. Anyone can increase the list. So off to the left, let's write rock bottom. Right? That's hopefully we get to the rock bottom like that. We're going to come into these rooms. And then after increase the list, let's write family disease. Right? When I came into these rooms, I thought the only person that I had hurt was myself. But that is absolutely not true. Anybody, all of my family members, all of the people I worked with, all of my friends, anybody that I was associated with was brought down with me, right? So this is a family disease. Now we're also, the paragraph what we just highlighted, we're going to write another note. You're going to write, ask sponsee, can you relate to this? right? So, and you can also, if you can fit it in there, first step meetings too. You know, so we're going to ask people at first step meetings, and we're going to ask our sponsees, and I want you guys to ask yourself if you can relate to that. The misunderstanding, the fierce resentment, the financial insecurity, the disgusted friends and employers, right? The warped lives. Ask yourself as well. Because again, this is a program of identification. We hope this volume will inform and comfort those who are or who may be affected. There are many. Highly competent psychiatrists who have dealt with us have found it sometimes impossible to persuade an alcoholic to discuss his situation without reserve. Strangely enough, wives, parents, and intimate friends usually find us even more unapproachable than do the psychiatrist and the doctor. Okay, so we got the squiggly lines. Obviously, we're going to highlight that whole paragraph. But the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, who is properly armed with facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished, right? So let's go to the second line that we just highlighted and circle that word facts, F-A-C-T-S, okay? And you're not going to know what this means yet, but off to the left, let's write fourth step column, okay? We're gonna take a look at those facts in the fourth-step column when we get to that. Fourth step column. Yep, and I know you don't know what that means yet, but we will know what that means. So this is telling us right here that once we do these steps and we recover, we're the only people that are going to be able to go out and help these sick and dying alcoholics, right? That's on us. Because nobody, you know, and think about yourself when you were out there and how you would not listen to your family or your friends or your work, right? That the man who is making the approach has had the same difficulty, that he obviously knows what he is talking about, that his whole deportment means behavior and bearing, that his whole deportment shouts at the new prospect that he is a man with a real answer, that he has no attitude of holier than thou, nothing whatever except the sincere desire to be helpful, that there are no fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured. These are the conditions we have found most effective. After such an approach, many take up their beds and walk again. So at the top of the page, we're going to write actions first, and our minds follow. Actions first, and our minds follow. We can't think our way out of this disease. We can't do it, right? So we've got to take the actions. We're backwards people. Any other therapy in the world, they're going to try to change your thinking first and then your actions. Here in Alcoholics Anonymous, we got to do the actions. We just have to trust in our sponsor and do what they're telling us to do. And then we're going to see the results when we're done with the work, right? So actions first and our minds follow. We're backwards people. None of us makes a sole vocation. Vocation means job or career. None of us makes a sole vocation of this work, nor do we think its effectiveness would be increased if we did. Okay, so let's highlight the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. We feel that elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. A much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. Okay, and then highlight one more line. All of us spend much of our spare time in this sort of effort. Right? You can stop highlighting there, which we're going to describe. So on the left, let's write, if you can fit it in, practicing, next to what we just highlighted, practicing the principles at home and at work is the harder part. Practicing the principles at home and at work is the harder part, right? My first 6 months in these rooms, I was not working these steps, and I was a little bit of a mess, but I found that for 1 hour a week, I could be a good, or 1 hour a day, I could be a good guy. But practicing these principles at home and at work is the harder part. And then where it says all of us, again, that's the first 100 people who wrote this book. So whenever you hear we or all of us, that's what they're talking about. sort of effort which we are going to describe. Also, for the first year and a half Bill Wilson did this, he spent almost all of his time running out trying to help people on an almost one-on-one basis. A few are fortunate enough to be so situated that they can give nearly all their time to the work. If we keep on the way we are going, there is little doubt that much good will result, but the surface of the problem would hardly be scratched. Those of us who live in large cities are overcome by the reflection that close by, hundreds are dropping into oblivion every day. Many could recover if they had the opportunity we have enjoyed. How then shall we present that which has been so freely given us? We have concluded to publish an anonymous volume. So underline anonymous volume, right? And I mean, it's quite obvious, but next to it, write this book, right? The book we're reading now. We have concluded to publish an anonymous volume setting forth the problem as we see it. We, just underline we again, we shall bring to the task our combined experience and knowledge. This should suggest a useful program for anyone concerned with a drinking problem. So off to the left, let's write all 100 had to agree before writing down. That's what they're talking about. All 100 had to agree before writing down. So what would happen is Bill would write the pages and he would send them to the group in New York and he would send them to the group in Akron. Right? And they would be sending mail back and forth, and all of them would have to agree upon this before they wrote it down, right? So, I remember when the first time I tried to read this book, or the first several times, I disagreed with everything it said. I didn't know then what I know now is if I argue with these things, I'm arguing with 100 people. I'm not arguing with just one person. We're going to highlight the next two lines. Of necessity, there will have to be discussion of matters medical, psychiatric, social, and religious. Okay, so the first line we highlighted, next to that, write, we are not doctors. And the second line, you can write 4 balances of well-being. Those are the 4 balances of well-being. Medical, psychiatric, social, and religious. We are aware, and again, if I'm going too fast, tell me to slow down.
Yeah, wait.
All right, slow down. They at work, those...
Full balance.
Yeah.
Have some more.
No, at work, up in the office where the muckety mucks work, they just installed a $40,000 cappuccino machine. So now I tried it out today, so
Okay.
it's pretty good.
Full balance.
I busted into the board meeting and I said, hey, let me in here. We are aware that these matters are, from their very nature, controversial. Nothing would please us so much as to write a book which would contain no basis for contention or argument. We shall do our utmost to achieve that ideal. Okay, so let's highlight the next 3 lines. Most of us sense that real tolerance of other people's shortcomings and viewpoints and a respect for their opinions, our attitudes, hold on, don't turn the page yet, underline shortcomings and draw a little arrow down and write defects of character. Bill is going to use a lot of terms, and you can interchange these 2 terms when you look at them in the steps. Shortcomings are the same as defects of character as we go forward in the steps. And at the very bottom of the page, when you're first working with somebody, my sponsor had me write, if they don't ask your advice, don't give it. Right? What we're going to do is we're going to tell people when we're going through this book what the first 100 did, and we're going to tell our sponsee what we did. Right? Now, if we start telling everybody what to do unsolicited, we're going to turn these people off. Right? So if they don't ask your advice, don't give it. Right? Hopefully we're going to get to a point where when we're working with somebody out there that they are going to ask our advice on things. But early on, if we try to tell somebody, that's a kind of a shaky ground. So if they don't ask your advice, don't give it. We're gonna lead by example. We're going to show them what we did. We're going to show what the first 100 did to recover. Remember, this is a attraction, not promotion. Attitudes which make us more useful to others. Okay? So let's highlight the next 3 lines. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help their needs. So let's underline the word constant as well and draw a little arrow and write not occasional. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend on our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. Right? So my sponsor had me write something else. He said, you better write tall order for a selfish prick next to that one. Right? So, and I did. I wrote it down because I was worried about John and John alone when I came into these rooms. You may already have asked yourself why it is that all of us became so very ill from drinking. Doubtless you are curious to discover how and why, in the face of expert opinion to the contrary, underline, we have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body. Right? There it is again. We've recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body. If you are an alcoholic who wants to get over it, you may already be asking, underline and put an asterisk on either side. What do I have to do? Okay? So over to the left, we're gonna write the word action, and under it we're gonna write ask sponsee here. Do you want to stop drinking? So when we get to this point in the book and you're working with somebody, right here is where you say, hey, do you want to stop drinking? Right? And of course, we're hoping that the person is going to say, yeah, of course I do. What do you think I'm here for? But we've got to ask them, right? Or her. Now, if I've been working with somebody and they say, well, I'm really not sure, okay, then I got to question whether there's somebody else out there that I might be better spending my time with, right? Somebody who really does want to quit drinking. It is the purpose of this book, highlight the next two lines, to answer such questions specifically. We shall tell you what we have done. Right? So remember in the forewords where it said they're going to tell us exactly, specifically what to do, it's telling this again here. Right? And where it says what we have done, under the word done, right, not thought. We're going to tell you what we have done. Right? Because again, this is a program of action. We are not going to be able to wait. The more we try to think our way out of it, the deeper we get into it, right? So we've got to do the work, right? And I didn't understand that. I didn't know what the hell they were talking about. But I was so miserable and I was so desperate this last time that I said, what the hell? I'm gonna do what you guys asked me to do, and I'll be doggoned if it didn't work. Before going into a detailed discussion, it may be well to summarize some points as we see them. How many times have people said to us, I can take it or leave it alone, why can't he? Why don't you drink like a gentleman or quit? That fellow can't handle his liquor. Why don't you try beer and wine? Lay off the hard stuff. His willpower must be weak. He could stop if he wanted to. She's such a sweet girl, I should think he'd stop for her sake. The doctor told him that if he ever drank again, it would kill him. But there he is, all lit up again. So next to that, we're going to write a few things. We're going to write doesn't work for us, and then under with the arrows to all those phrases. And under that, we're going to write people who don't understand alcoholism. Right? So doesn't work for us. And just draw an arrow to all these little questions, and people who don't understand alcoholism. Doesn't work for us, people who don't understand alcoholism. Now these are commonplace observations on drinkers which we hear all the time. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. Okay, highlight to the end of the paragraph. We see that these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours. And again, after ours, write not alcoholics. Okay, so we're going to read a little bit about the two types of drinkers that all of these phrases might be spoken by, right? Or that they might refer to. So let's highlight moderate drinkers, and next to that write type 1. Type 1, okay? Moderate drinkers have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely if they have good reason for it. Highlight, they can take it or leave it alone. Okay, so remember, the moderate drinker, in the doctor's opinion, that's the person that gets home, they're tired, they're wrought up from the day's work, they get home, all stressed out, they have a couple of drinks, right? They get a little bit of a tipsy feeling, they relax, they have dinner, and they don't drink anymore. That's the moderate drinker, right? So these expressions could refer to them, right? Draw a line all the way under take it or leave it alone. Draw a line under that, and underneath it write type 2. Okay. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. Highlight hard drinker. And at the bottom you can also write heavy drinker, hard drinker or heavy drinker. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time, right? The hard drinker's got it easy. He's only going to die a couple of years early, right? Highlight 1, 2, 3, the next 5 words. If a sufficiently strong reason, just that, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or the warning of a doctor. Okay, highlight the next 2 lines. Becomes operative, this man can also stop or moderate. Okay, so even the heavy hard drinker can stop or moderate. He gets a DWI, and the judge says, look, you're caught drinking again, you're going in the slammer. This guy can stop, or he can even moderate. Although he may find it difficult and troublesome, and may even need medical attention, right? We see these guys all the time, right? They're the guys, they say, John Henry, when I was in the Navy, I drank just like you did, man. I got thrown into the brig, I got in all kinds of trouble, but I got out of the Navy, I got married, I started going to church, I had kids, and I quit drinking like that. Why can't you quit? Right? No, these people are not alcoholics. They're only hard drinkers. They do not have the obsession of the mind, nor do they have the allergy of the body, right? So they're different than us. And some of them, funny enough, some of these guys get sentenced to AA and they come in here. They come into these rooms, right? And they can sober up on the fellowship alone because they're not alcoholics. Now, here's the real danger. What if you're a sick and dying alcoholic and you get one of these guys and he loves the fellowship and he loves being around us and maybe he likes the girls? What if you're a sick and dying alcoholic and you get him as a sponsor? He's never had to work the steps to sober up, right? And he's going to be your sponsor. And I see this happening all the time. People, they say, well, I've got a sponsor. Well, are you going through the book and doing the steps? Well, no, we're not. Well, what is he doing? Well, he's telling me to go to more meetings. He's telling me to join the sober softball team. He's telling me to read the book. You're not doing the steps. You're probably going to die. I have to tell people that all the time. So we have to be real careful when we're selecting a sponsor. We want somebody who's done the work. Otherwise, they can't help us. Okay, so we're going to draw a line through across the page, all the way across the page under medical attention. Actually, I'm sorry, that's just my messy stuff. Never mind. Now it's too late. Oh, no, it is. No, it is true, right? Because we got the third type. So yes, draw that line. But what about the real alcoholic? Highlight real alcoholic and write type 3. Type 3. So these are the 3 types of drinker, right? The moderate, and the hard or the heavy, and now they've got us, right? What about the real alcoholic? He may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker. Highlight the next 3 lines. But at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. Okay, so some of us can drink safely for years. We can go out there and drink safely for years, but we drink ourselves into alcoholism, right? Some of us are alcoholics right off the bat, right? The first time I ever had a kegel brow out at my parents' cabin on Big Fish Lake, I went back for another and another and another, and I blacked out. Other people safely for years, but by the time they get to these rooms, they're alcoholics too. So it really doesn't make any difference. We come into these rooms, we've got the obsession of the mind, we got the allergy of the body, we're all alcoholics, we all need to do the work. So we're going to read, and I want you guys to think about if you can relate to any of these descriptions as I read them. And we're also, so you can write next to the whole rest of what I'm going to read, you can write, can you relate to any of these descriptions, right? And I want you guys to think if you can relate, but also you're going to ask your sponsees if you can relate to this too. Right? And we might even read a little bit of this in some first step meetings we're in as well too. You know, my sponsor was a big advocate. He said, John, you better take your book to every meeting you go to, because what if there's somebody that needs help and you remember a passage? You've got to be able to get your book open and you got to be able to read that passage for the fellow in the meeting. So he's a very big advocate of carrying your big book with you. Here is the fellow who has been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. He does absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. Underline this little line, he is a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Okay, so next to that, we're going to write Robert Louis Stevenson, right? Or RLS, I always get that on the crosswords too, RLS. And you can write 1819 is when he wrote it. He wrote Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, 1819. And you can write he was an alcoholic. He was an alcoholic. So you got to think to yourself, was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde almost a biographical story, right? Because, he's a normal guy, but all of a sudden he starts to drink and he becomes a crazy man, right? So Robert Louis Stevenson, alcoholic as well as a drug addict. Now think about if any of these relate to you. He is seldom mildly intoxicated. He is always more or less insanely drunk. His disposition while drinking resembles his normal nature but little. He may be one of the finest fellows in the world, yet let him drink for a day and he frequently becomes disgustingly and even dangerously antisocial. Okay, highlight the next sentence. He has a positive genius for getting tight at exactly the wrong moment, particularly when some important decision must be made or engagement kept. Right? I mean, that was me. I don't know if it was the pressure or the stress, but whenever I had anything big coming up, I needed to relax. The obsession of the mind would kick in and I'd start drinking and I would blow it. Remember Bill Wilson? We talked about that deal he worked on for 3 months, and a few weeks prior to successful completion, he started drinking and he couldn't stop and he blew the whole deal. He is often perfectly sensible and well balanced concerning everything except liquor. But in that respect, he is incredibly dishonest and selfish. He often possesses special abilities, skills, and aptitudes, and has a promising career ahead of him. Right? Only an alcoholic's going to say that about himself, right? That's probably Bill. He uses his gifts to build up a bright outlook for his family and himself, and then pulls the structure down on his head by a senseless series of sprees. He is the fellow who goes to bed so intoxicated he ought to sleep the clock around, yet early next morning he searches madly for the bottle he misplaced the night before. If he can afford it, he may have liquor concealed all over his house to be certain no one gets his entire supply away from him to throw down the waste pipe. Any bottle hiders in here? I had bottles hid all over the place as well as drugs, right? I don't want anybody finding them all. As matters grow worse, he begins to use a combination of high-powered sedative and liquor to quiet his nerves so he can go to work. Then the day comes when he simply cannot make it and gets drunk all over again. Perhaps he goes to a doctor who gives him morphine or some sedative with which to taper off. Highlight. Then he begins to appear at hospitals and sanitariums. After sanitariums, you can write treatment centers, right? They've changed the names today, but it's with the same deal back then, right? Bill went into the town's hospital 3 times. That essentially was a drying out place and a treatment center. So next to that, which is the second part of that, right, can you identify, right? Because we're still doing descriptions. So again, it's very important that when we're taking our sponsees through this book, we're reading these, and I mean, if you're going one-on-one, you're going to read each of these, and you're going to stop and say, hey, can you identify with this? Can you identify with that, right? Because we've got because we think we're completely unique when we come into these rooms, and we've got to show people that indeed we're not. This is by no means a comprehensive picture of the true alcoholic, as our behavior patterns vary. But this description should identify him roughly. And remember, it also said somewhere that about periodic drinkers. So we can be binge drinkers and still be alcoholics, right? We don't have to be the daily drinkers. So let's highlight 1, 2, 3, 4, the next 5 lines. Why does he behave like this if hundreds of experiences have shown him that one drink means another debacle with all its attendant suffering and humiliation? Why is it he takes that one drink? Why can't he stay on the water wagon? Stop highlighting there. So next to that, we're going to write obsession of the mind. Remember, we talked about that in the doctor's opinion, right? I mean, for me, I'll never forget, man, I crashed my car and I got thrown into jail. And, it's ridiculous, but I did it. I beat my head against the brick wall because I wanted to get out. It was on a Friday, and I said I had a concussion when I got in the accident. They let me out of jail, and I said I am never drinking again. That is it. Guess what I was doing by 5 o'clock? Right, one of my sponsees, Eric, and I have his permission to tell him this. He just loved this because he said, he quit drinking forever. In the morning, he quit drinking, and he was on his 3rd mixed drink that afternoon on his porch when he remembered that he had quit that morning. That is the obsession of the mind. From time to time, it overcomes all ideas to the contrary and tells us it's okay to take a drink. And when that happens to us, our willpower doesn't work. Our willpower only works if we understand that we shouldn't do it, right? We've got that mental blank spot. What has become of the common sense and willpower that he still sometimes displays with respect to other matters? Perhaps there will never be a full answer to these questions. Opinions vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people. We are not sure why, once a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. Underline the next sentence, we cannot answer the riddle. Right? So, we're really not sure, right? I mean, we did look at that allergy of the body thing 2 weeks ago, but we're really not sure. We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from drink, as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. We are equally positive, highlight just to the end of the page, that once he takes any alcohol, whatever, into his system, something happens, both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. Next to that, let's write allergic reaction. So they just gave us, the obsession of the mind, and they gave us the allergic reaction, right? Now, unfortunately, I could be off the sauce for, by going to meetings. I remember many times I got 1 month, many times 2 months, a couple times I got 6 months. But you know what? When I went off the bend, when I went off the wagon and I drank, I woke up the next morning, right, after sleeping it off, and guess what's the first thing I thought about? Where am I going to get my next drink? When can I drink again? So when we relapse, we're both going to have the not only the allergy, but that obsession is going to just kill us. So at the bottom of the page, let's write some things. Let's write rum cake. Right, we got to be careful, man. We're not rum cake. Yeah, we get alcohol into our body. It doesn't matter how we do it. We get it in, we're going to be in trouble. So let's write rum cake. Let's write NyQuil. For heaven's sakes, NyQuil comes with its own shot glass. I relapsed on NyQuil a couple of times. I got a really bad cold. Oh, that one bottle didn't do it. I better go back to to Walgreens and get another one. I had the next one, and all of a sudden I'm just going to go to the liquor store, right? So NyQuil, and then also you can write pills from dentist. Right? Now, obviously, some of us are going to be prescribed pain pills, and, there's nothing we can do about it. Thank God that I haven't had anything happen to me, because I was off the sauce, and I got prescribed pain pills by the dentist, right? About a week later, I went to the doctor and faked some symptoms and got a prescription. 2 weeks after that, somehow I found drug dealers on the street, and I was buying hundreds of pills. So that got me, and that almost killed me too, right? So we've got to be real careful. I had a bad cold last year, and I went to Walgreens, that little doctor thing they had, and I went in there, and the gal had written me out some cough medicine or something, and I said, oh, by the way, I'm in recovery, I'm an alcoholic. alcoholic. And she, oh my God, and she ripped it up. She had prescribed me codeine, right? And I was like, thank God you didn't give me that, doc. So we've got to tell our doctors and our dentists, say, look, man, I'm in recovery. I'm an alcoholic. So even if we absolutely have to take the stuff, we're going to be monitored very carefully on it, because for many of us, I've seen many alcoholics that have relapsed on these pills, and a lot of them are dead. So we've got to be very careful. We lose a lot of people to pill addiction as well. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. At the top of the page, let's write, worry about the first drink. Worry about the first drink. That's the one that's going to kill us. Worry about the first drink. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Highlight this next sentence. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. I'm going to read that again. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. Right? We can't do anything about the allergy of the body, right? If we drink, we're in trouble. If we take even one drink. So we've got to attack this problem in our mind. That's the only place that we can do it. If you ask him why he started on that last bender, the chances are he will offer you any one of 100 alibis. Sometimes the excuses have a certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. They sound like the philosophy of the man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so that he can't feel the ache. If you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, he will laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk. Right? So, guys, we got to remember that when we pick up after a period of sobriety, we are always stone cold sober when we take that first drink. Or in my case, I was stark raving sober, right? Because remember, the doctor's opinion, we read about how our emotions build up and they build up and they build up. And then all of a sudden our mind sees nothing wrong with taking that first drink. So we become stark raving sober. And it talks... let's see, I guess I'll do that. Let's highlight the next little sentence. Once in a while he may tell the truth. I love that one, right? And the truth, strange to say, is usually that he has no more idea why he took that first drink than you have. Some drinkers have excuses with which they are satisfied part of the time. Highlight the next 4 lines. But in their hearts, they really do not know why they do it. Once this malady has a real hold, they are a baffled lot. There is the obsession that somehow, someday, they will beat the game. Right? Next to what we just highlighted, right? Insanity of the disease. Insanity of the disease. We do this over and over again, right? And somehow we still think that we're going to find a way to drink safely. When I was about 6 years old, I went down the street to Craigie Gardner's house, and he had just gotten a brand new set of golf clubs. And, I didn't know anything about golf, so I stood right behind Craigie Gardner, and he wound that baby up and swung with all his might, and that club hit me right in the face, and that caused me more pain than I'd ever experienced at that point in my life, right? And I got to tell you guys, from that time to today, I have never had the strange obsession to stand behind somebody who's swinging a golf club, right? But I've gone out and gotten drunk over and over and over. Just got out of jail, just crashed the car, just lost my job. Did not matter. I would go out and do it over and over again. But they often suspect they are down for the count. How true this is, few realize. In a vague way, their families and friends sense that these drinkers are abnormal, but everybody hopefully awaits the day when the sufferer will rouse himself from his lethargy. morbid drowsiness, his lethargy, and assert his power of will. My dad was like that. He said, by God, John, I've seen you through your whole life. You've got the strongest willpower of anybody I know. I know that you're going to lick this thing. You just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, John. Right? He always had great faith in me. And one of the things that I'm sad about is he died before he got to see me sober up. So we're going to highlight the next 2 lines. The tragic truth is that if the man be a real alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive. Now, before you turn the page, write crossing the invisible line next to that. Crossing the invisible line. And again, I don't care if you're a binge drinker. I don't care if you drank yourself into alcoholism. I don't care if you were a blackout drinker from the first time you had a beer like me. It doesn't matter. At some point, we're all there. He has lost control. Keep highlighting the next 3 lines. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. Stop highlighting there. So we're going to write something at the top of the page. My own memory, and this is in referring to meetings, my own memory does not keep me sober. Why would your war stories? Okay? So I'm talking about first step meetings. My own memory doesn't keep me sober. Why would your war stories, right? And we'll write something a little bit further. Because by God, if I just got out of jail and I'm relapsing and I'm sitting in a meeting and you tell me about you just getting out of jail and tell me your war stories, they aren't going to have any effect on me either. The tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it is suspected. There we got the squiggly writing again, so let's go ahead and highlight that whole paragraph. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reason yet obscure, have lost the power of choice and drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. Or in many of our cases, yesterday, right? We are without defense against the first drink. So off to the left, let's write, war stories don't work at meetings, give vision of hope. War stories don't work at meetings. Give vision of hope. War stories don't work at meetings. Give vision of hope. I've been in first step meetings and somebody gives a drunkalog, right? And then the next person gives a drunkalog. I got to tell you, when I'm in a first step, I was damn happy to hear the guy say, my life was crazy, it was unmanageable, but I did this and this is what happened. I no longer have to do this. My life has changed, and somebody that gives me a vision of hope, I walk out of that first step meeting saying, by God, if it worked for that fella, maybe it'll work for me. So I don't want to listen to somebody give me a 20, 30-minute drunkalog. I want a vision of hope, and that's what I try to give people when I'm in these first step meetings. I want to give them a reason not to come back because their life can change, right? I want them to think, oh my God, for the first time in my life, there's something that might help me, right? The almost certain consequences that follow taking even a glass of beer do not crowd into the mind to deter us. If these thoughts occur, they are hazy and readily supplanted, underline, with the old threadbare idea that this time we shall handle ourselves like other people. Just highlight that little thing and write, we can't. We can't. Right? And that used to bug the heck out of me. I'd see other people having a couple of beers, go over to a buddy's house to watch a football game, and I see that and I'm like, maybe I can do it, right? There is a complete failure of the kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove, right? The alcoholic may say to himself in the most casual way, it won't burn me this time, so here's how. Okay, highlight to the end of the paragraph. Or perhaps he doesn't think at all. How often have some of us begun to drink in this nonchalant way, and after the third or fourth pounded on the bar and said to ourselves, for God's sakes, how did I ever get started again? Only to have that thought supplanted by, well, I'll stop with the sixth drink, or what's the use anyhow? So next to that, we're going to write, Ask sponsee if they have experienced this. Ask sponsee if they have experienced this. You know, again, I mean, that's my sponsor. You know, when he said, "You raise your hand in those meetings to be a sponsor," right? And I, you know, when the first guy asked me, I called him up and I said, "You son of a bitch, I'm going to kill this guy. I don't know what to do." And he said, "You sure do. You just take him through the book and do everything that we did with you in Code Blue." And I said, "What? Really?" And he said, "That's what you're doing." And if you get somebody who's willing to do the work, it's going to work. Now, if you get somebody who's not willing to do the work, then it won't work, right? When this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he has probably circle the next 4 words, placed himself beyond human aid. And then highlight to insane. And unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. Okay, so off to the left, let's write fellowship made of humans. The fellowship is made of humans. Now, our book's telling us we're beyond human aid. Now, remember, they're telling us again that the fellowship isn't enough. But if we can combine the fellowship with the spiritual experience, we're going to be okay. At the bottom, again in parentheses, write need psychic change. That's what Dr. Silkworth talked about. Need psychic change. Placed himself beyond human aid, and unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. We need both powers. These stark and ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history. But for the grace of God, there would have been thousands more convincing demonstrations. Highlight this little line. So many want to stop but cannot. Next to that, in parentheses, write not willing. Not willing. Because I'm telling you guys, everybody that I've sponsored one-on-one, every single man that has done the work is sober today. And albeit I've got limited experience, but they're all sober. And the ones I've tried to work with that didn't do the work, I don't know where they are. I hope they're okay, but I don't know. There is a solution. Okay, obviously highlight that. There is a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride. Above that, write 4. Right? That's step 4. The confession of shortcomings. Above that, write 5. Which the process requires. Circle that word requires. Right? This isn't suggested. If you want to get better, there are requirements for its successful consummation. Above successful consummation, write 8 and 9. But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. When, therefore, we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, circle that again, this problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us to do but pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools. Above simple kit of spiritual tools, write 3 through 12. 3 through 12. Spiritual tools laid at our feet. Highlight to the end of the paragraph. We have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a 4th dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed. Right? So we're not talking about just quitting drinking. Next to that, write promise of spiritual experience. That is a promise of spiritual experience. If my life would have turned out like I thought it was going to be when I quit drinking, I never would have done it. But it's telling us we do these things, we're going to be rocketed into a 4th dimension of existence. Okay, so we're going to highlight the whole next paragraph as well. The great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences. Okay, right next to spiritual experiences, write page 567. Page 567. Which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and toward God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. Okay, so under where we wrote page 557, write jump to 567. And that's where we're going to go right now. We're going to jump to page 567. Now, if you've got a third edition, it might be 569, but I'm not positive. I know it's 2 pages one way or the other. So we're going to jump. Oh, by the way, this is so important, right? On page 25, it says fully explained Appendix 2. On page 27, it says for application, see Appendix 2. And on page 47, it says please read Appendix 2. So they really want us to read this thing. Very important. So we're going to go to 567.
Oh yeah, I remember reading that.
Okay, because here's what happened, guys. Remember, Bill Wilson, in his story, he talked about the cool, clean wind of the mountain blowing through his hair, and kaboom! He had that huge experience. Well, people got this book. They did all the work that we're going to do, and they wrote to the little office in New York, and they said, Bill, we're not getting that same experience you had. What are we doing wrong? We're doing something wrong. But you know what? They weren't doing anything wrong, and they're going to explain it in spiritual experience. So at the top of the page, let's write, when we develop spiritual ears and eyes, we change. Page 567. When we develop spiritual ears and eyes, we change. Right? And that's, I've had people far smarter than me tell me that people who have woken up spiritually are not thirsty, and that's true. So when we develop spiritual ears and eyes, we change. So we're at the 2 spiritual experience. Everybody there? Okay. We're going to write spiritual experience equals suddenly and quickly. Spiritual experience equals suddenly and quickly. Spiritual awakening equals slowly. Spiritual experience equals suddenly and quickly. Spiritual awakening equals slowly. The terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book, and we're going to circle every time it says change or something, we're going to circle it. I'll tell you when. The terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book, which, upon careful reading, shows that the personality change, circle that, sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself among us in many different forms. Yet it is true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that these, underline, personality changes or religious experiences, don't worry about that word, must be in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals. Circle spectacular upheavals. To upheave something is to change it. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous. After erroneous, you can write not true. Right? So they weren't having that white light experience that Bill had, and they were freaking out. They said, we're doing something wrong. But they're telling us that's okay. In the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes, circle that, are described. Though it was not our intention to create such an impression, many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that in order to recover, they must, circle must, acquire an immediate and overwhelming, circle overwhelming, to overwhelm something is to change, overwhelming God consciousness, followed at once by a vast change, circle vast change, in feeling and outlook. And by the way, when you guys get home tonight, I want you to reread this. Among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, circle transformations, though frequent, are by no means the rule. Right? So they're saying the white light experiences are not the rule. Most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James calls, highlight the next line, educational variety, because they develop slowly over a period of time. Just that. And next to that, let's write through working the steps. Through working the steps. Again, the spiritual experience is white light, but I got to tell you guys, the first time I worked these steps, I had that awakening in a matter of about 3 to 4 months, so I actually think that was pretty doggone quick when I finally started doing this stuff. Quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference, circle difference, long before he is himself. he finally realizes that he has undergone a profound alteration, circle alteration, in his reaction to life, that such a change, circle change, could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. What often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accomplished by years of self-discipline. With few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource, right? Underlying inner resource, which they presently identify with their underlying own conception of a power greater than themselves. Underline that. Most of us think this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of spiritual experience. Our more religious members call it God consciousness. Most emphatically, we wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honestly, circle the word honestly, facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover. Any of us, provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. Underline the next sentence. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. We find that no one need have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. Highlight the end there and then highlight the little caption on the bottom too. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery, but these are indispensable. So next to that, write in big letters HOW. That's what they call the how of the program. Okay. There is a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. Okay, so we're going to write a couple of things. Where it says willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness, draw a little arrow down to some space where you can write, if I do this, I remain teachable. Okay? The willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness, where you wrote HOW, if I do this, I remain teachable. That's critical. Critical. I was a huge scoffer, man. I scoffed at everything. I don't believe that. I'm not going to try that. That ain't going to work, right? But if we do this, we're going to remain. And that's not just about these steps. That's about everything in our lives. That's going to open our minds up to so many wonderful things. Under Herbert Spencer, you can write 19th century social philosopher. 19th century social philosopher. Okay. And then again, we're gonna write HOW equals honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. So let's write it again. We're going to have our sponsees write that too. HOW equals honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. Whenever you hear somebody say that's the how of the program, that's what they're talking about. Now, I'm going to translate that statement I read by Herbert Spencer. I'm going to put it in layman's terms. Must try stuff before you say you don't like or don't believe. Right? Must try stuff before you say you don't like or don't believe. And that's that there is a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. That means must try stuff before you say you don't like or don't believe. Okay, so you don't need to write anything more, but I'm going to just tell you a couple of things. Bill changed, after the first printing of the first edition, he changed one word. Right? In the 12th step, he had said, having had a spiritual experience as the result of these steps. The only word he ever changed, he changed that to awakening, right? Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of this. And he did that in the second printing because he felt that the awakening happening over time was going to relate to more people than the word experience. So that's the only thing that he ever changed, right? So the other thing for me, and you don't write any of this, but when we come into these rooms, we are restless, irritable, and discontented. We're full of guilt, shame, and remorse, right? I was running only on selfishness and self-centeredness. Now, if I can go from that, or we can go from that to one who has peace of mind, serenity, and happiness, and the willingness to help others, that's an entire change in the way we think. That's what they're talking about when they say spiritual experience, spiritual awakening, personality change sufficient to recover from alcohol. That's what Dr. Silkworth meant by the psychic change, right? So again, it used to be a spiritual experience, but now it's awakening because that's more relatable. So we're going to go back to where we were, and I'm going to be reading fast here. We're back to page 25. Yep, back to 25. If you are as seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle-of-the-road solution. Underline that and write no half measures. No half measures. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible. No half measures. And if we had passed into the region from which there is highlight to the end of the page, no return through human aid, we had but two alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could. Okay, so next to that, write step 1, remain powerless. That's step 1, remaining powerless. I don't want to go on to the bitter end. Blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could. Step 1, remain powerless. And the other, okay, to accept spiritual help. Circle that and write step 2. That's all it is. To accept spiritual help. So, next to intolerable situation, write insanity, death, prison. Insanity, death, prison. And there it is again, fully explained on Appendix 2, right? They want us to read that baby. You know, for me, guys, I was going to cash out my 401k, drink it all up, and then kill myself when it was over, right? That was my great plan. Luckily, I went for option door number 2, accept spiritual help, right? We did because we honestly wanted to, and we were willing to make the effort. Underline make the effort, and in that little margin, write take action, work steps. Take action, work steps. We don't learn easily, man. I don't know what it is about alcoholics, but we're hardwired, and we do not. It takes a lot to make us learn or change. A certain American businessman, okay, so right away we can write Roland Hazard, R-O-L-A-N-D, H-A, I believe, Z-A-R-D, Roland Hazard. A certain American businessman had ability, good sense, and high character. For years he had floundered from one sanitarium to another. Right? Wow, that's what a crazy thing statement that is. He had consulted the best-known American psychiatrist. Then he had gone to Europe, placing himself in the care of a celebrated physician, the psychiatrist Dr. Jung. Circle Dr. Jung to circle the name, who prescribed for him. And off to the left you can write 1 day a week for a year. He didn't go to a 30-day treatment center. 1 day a week for a year. This guy, his parents had a heck of a lot of money, man. He had been through every psychiatrist in the U.S. and they sent him over there. Who prescribed for him. Though experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. Above all, he believed he had acquired such a, highlight the next 2 lines, profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Next to that, write self-knowledge. Self-knowledge. So he's got the self-knowledge, baby. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. Okay, so you don't need to write this, but he for a full year, 1 day a week, he couldn't even make it back to the boat. He got drunk on the way back to the ship, right? So he returned to this doctor, whom he admired, and asked him point blank why he could not recover. Highlight this little line. He wished above all things to regain self-control. He seemed quite rational and well-balanced with respect to other problems, yet he had no control whatever over alcohol. Why was this? He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. Highlight to the end of the paragraph. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. He could never regain his position in society, and he would have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was a great physician's opinion, right? So Dr. Jung said, there's nothing I can do for you. you're probably going to die. I mean, Dr. Jung could have said, I'll treat you for another year, get out your checkbook, because he had unlimited money. But the doctor was very humble. He said, science cannot help you. You're probably going to die. Sorry to tell you that. Nothing I can do. But this man still lives and is a free man. He does not need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. He can go anywhere on this earth where other free men may go without disaster. Highlight the next two lines, provided he remains willing to maintain a certain simple attitude. Okay, highlight that, and then write, do 12 steps, take action. Do 12 steps, take action. And then you can also write, being willing to practice principles is answer to question. Being willing to practice principles is answer to questions. And the question is actually coming up here. Some of our alcoholic readers may think they can do without spiritual help. Let us tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with the doctor. The doctor said, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I have never seen one single case recover where that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you. Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. He said to the doctor, is there no exception? Next to that, write, am I unique? Okay, then highlight the next word, yes. Replied the doctor, there is. Then highlight the next sentence, exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Next to that, write solutions. Solutions. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called, underline, vital spiritual experiences. Again, write page 567 next to that. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. They appear to be in the nature of, highlight the next 6 words, huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Okay? And then, highlight the next 4 lines. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes which were once the guiding forces of these lives of these men are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begins to dominate them. Right? So again, man, we got to just write, bring the body. Next to that, write, bring the body, the mind will follow. It's so important. Bring the body, the mind will follow. Bring the body, the mind will follow. In fact, I have been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangement within you. With many individuals, the methods which I employ are successful. Highlight the next line, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description. After that, write hopeless. Upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that after all, he was a good church member. Hey, I'm a good church member, I'll be okay. This hope, however, was destroyed by the doctors telling him, highlight to the end of the page, that while his religious convictions were very good, in his case they did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience. Okay, so we're going to write something. Must have relationship with higher power. Must have relationship with higher power. Then a little arrow, effort, right, or through effort. Must have a relationship with a higher power through effort. Knowledge of God does not mean relationship. So the fact that he's a good church member, big deal. Must have a relationship with a higher power through effort. Knowledge of God does not mean relationship. All right. We're going to be 5 minutes over and we'll be done. Here was the terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself when he had the extraordinary experience which, as we have already told you, made him a free man. So guys, we got the first break in Alcoholics Anonymous because Roland Hazard, there were 3 great psychiatrists at the time. There was Sigmund Freud, there was Alfred Adler, and there was Carl Jung. And the first one that Roland went to was Sigmund Freud, and Freud wasn't taking patients. Next, he went to Alfred Adler. Alfred Adler said, I'm too busy, man, I'm writing this paper. So the third guy he went to was Carl Jung. And Carl Jung and Alfred Adler were students of Sigmund Freud. But Carl Jung broke with Sigmund Freud and Alfred Adler on one thing and one thing only. Adler and Freud thought all solutions could be found in the mind scientifically. All solutions only in the mind. Carl Jung thought some people might be able to be helped by spirituality. What a break we caught there, because if he would have gone to one of those other guys, I would be sitting here right now saying, if my mama hadn't put me on the toilet sideways, I wouldn't be an alcoholic, right? We'd be analyzing ourselves. We're not. We're finding the solution through spirituality. Fantastic. We in our turn sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. Highlight to the end of the paragraph, what seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. A new life has been given to us, or if you prefer, a design for living that really works. Again, a design for living, just write the 12 steps right in there. The distinguished American psychologist William James in his book Varieties of Religious Experiences indicates a multitude of ways in which men have discovered God. We have no desire to convince anyone that there is only one way. Highlight that. We have no desire to convince anyone that there is only one way by which faith can be acquired. If what we have learned and felt and seen means anything at all, it means that all of us, whatever our race, creed, or color, are the children of a living Creator with whom we may form a relationship. Highlight that, may form a relationship upon simple and understandable terms, as soon as we are willing and honest, circle willing and honest, enough to try. Next to that, let's write, must also listen. Two-way street. Right? So they're talking about a relationship with a higher power. They're not talking about, mumbling the Our Father and heading off to work. It's a relationship. We must also listen. Two-way street. Those having religious affiliations will find here nothing disturbing to their beliefs or ceremonies. There is no friction among us over such matters. We think it no concern of ours what religious bodies our members identify themselves with as individuals. This should be an entirely personal affair with which each one decides for himself. Highlight that. In the light of his past associations or his present choice. So very important, we're going to write one more thing. Don't care who God is, care that God is. Don't care who God is, care that God is. Don't care who God is, care that God is. In the following chapter, there appears an explanation of alcoholism as we understand it, then a chapter addressed to the agnostic. Many who were once in this class are now among our members. Surprisingly enough, we find such convictions no great obstacle to a spiritual experience. Further on, highlight this little sentence. Clear-cut directions are given showing how we recovered. Highlight that and write 12 steps. These are followed by 42 personal experiences. You can write stories after that. In the back of the book, each individual in his personal story describes in his own language and from his own point of view, highlight the way he established his relationship with God. Just that little thing there. And again, we formed the relationship, or at least I did, by working the steps. I had no relationship prior to working the steps. These give a fair cross-section of our membership and a clear-cut idea of what has actually happened in their lives. We hope no one will consider these self-revealing accounts in bad taste. Our hope is that many alcoholic men and women desperately in need will see these pages, and we believe that it is only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problems that they will be persuaded to say, highlight, yes, I am one of them too. I must have this thing. Okay, so we're going to write some homework. This is the first work we're going to start now. So, and this is for your sponsee too. So write homework. Homework number 1. Ask 5 people, how did you establish your relationship? You need to say with God or your higher power, I don't care which. Ask 5 people, how did you establish your relationship with God or your higher power? I asked 3 people in the program, somebody who I thought was really religious and my sister. So ask 5 people, how did you establish your relationship with God or your higher power? Number 2.
Wait a minute.
Okay?
Okay.
Okay, so number 2, take a sheet of paper. We're going to just write what God is and God isn't. And I want you to do it like this. So on one side write God is, and then just write some things that you think God is or that you would like God to be. I don't care if you don't believe in Him. What would you like Him to be? And then over on the other side write God isn't. Right, so I had some things like love, peace, security over here. I had war, famine, anger. So God is on one side, God is on the other. That's number 2, right? And then number 3, 5 things you're grateful for in the last week. So number 1, ask 5 people, how did you establish your relationship with God or your higher power? Number 2, do the God is, God isn't thing in columns. Number 3, 5 things grateful for in last week. And then I just have one quick thing to read if I can find it, and what I missed we'll do next week. Really quick, I just want to say, we're pretty proud of our 12 steps here. So, where did these steps really come from? Well, step number 1 came from Dr. Silkworth, the little doctor. He's a non-alcoholic doctor that treated 50,000 alcoholics. Where did step 2 come from? It came from Dr. Jung on the other side of the world. It went from Jung to Roland to Ebby to Bill. Where did steps 3 through 12 come from? 3 through 12 came from the Oxford group, which is a bunch of non-alcoholics practicing first century Christianity. So Silkworth had the problem, but he didn't have the solution or the action. Jung didn't know the problem, he had the solution, but he didn't have the action. The Oxford groupers, they didn't have the problem or the solution, they had the practical program of action. Right? So somehow this all gelled in the idea of Bill Wilson, and it came together. And then, really quickly, before the 1930s, it was here and there, once in a while, now and then, somebody would have this experience. Today, it was a better chance of getting hit by lightning. Today, here now in these rooms, every time an alcoholic will apply these steps to their life, they can recover, man. So this is a miracle that has occurred, and we get to participate, right? It is the greatest thing ever. Let's say the 3rd step prayer, and we'll get out of here.
Just read one.
No more cappuccino for you. No.
Hey, if I wouldn't have had it, it would take till 8:30.
Do you want us to bring in our homework next week?
Yes, bring it in. Yep. A couple people who are willing to share it will share it. God, I offer myself to Thee to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. Peace! All right, thanks everybody.